Howdy folks, it is Diecast Buffet here again. Today we have a little bit of a special video. We'll be talking about why diecast yellow, how they yellow, and how can you avoid it. Look, one thing about being a diecast collector is you're going to see diecasts that are going to have yellowed plastic, they're going to deteriorate, they're going to get weaker, and eventually they're going to break. So hopefully you'll learn a little bit with this and maybe some tips to how to preserve your diecast and keep them safe. So make sure to give the video a huge thumbs up. Well, let's jump right into it. Alrighty folks, so I have an example set up here in the studio to help maybe teach you all a little bit about how yellowing happens, why it happens, and how to possibly avoid it. So I'm going to explain this really quickly, what we have here in the studio. These are all parts to a 2007 to 2010 Chevrolet Impala COT Cup Car 1/64 scale. This is the interior cockpit section of the car. This is the rear window, and then this is the dashboard. The ones on the left are what you would see in a good condition car. You know, for instance, the one we have back here. The plastic is the normal gray. It has not been yellowed. Same with the clear plastic. And then you have, of course, the dashboard. These are all three different types of plastic. They're all three different types. They yellow differently. And as you can see, the middle one, oh, it's getting yellowed. And then the right side over here is pretty much the extreme case of yellowing. And back to my point about plastics yellowing differently, you can see right here how the middle of it is pretty close to the plastic over here on the left. However, the rest of it is so brittle and yellow that it literally broke off. I could literally snap this thing and it would literally crack into pieces. I mean, look how tainted and just absolutely destroyed this rear window is. Absolutely embarrassing how bad these things have yellowed. Keep in mind, these were only manufactured 15 years ago. Need a quick little example? This is a car that was manufactured over 25 years ago. Look at the yellowing. Not a single bit of plastic yellowing on this entire car. I did a diecast review on it. I can confirm this thing is not even yellowed. This is stuff made around 15 years ago to 25 years ago. So my point is, it's about the plastic chemical mixtures. It's not so much the age itself, it's how they're manufactured. And we'll quickly talk about all this stuff because I feel like there's a lot to be taught about this, and there's probably a lot of misinformation about it in the, you know, maybe the 1/64 hobby community. And again, this is another example that you can just see again how brittle this plastic becomes. When it becomes this brittle, you could literally just snap it like nothing. And as you can see, when I drilled this one out, it removed that entire panel around the rivet, a little hole there. That's where the rivet goes inside of the die cast. Well, when I pulled it out of the car, it just cracked it. It didn't even bend it. It didn't stress it. It literally just snapped it. So the more yellow the plastic is, the easier it is for it to crack, and it's pretty much garbage. It is all specific to how it's manufactured. And what you might be thinking, DB, why is that the case? So decades ago, plastic to be made, not as toxic, it's not as flammable, X, Y, and Z. The problem with that is it expedites the yellowing process on a molecular level type of chemical inside of the plastic. Over time, it goes to the surface. So this one basically has that stuff deep within the plastic, and as time goes on, it exposes itself and goes to the surface. Now, what makes plastic so different is it is a combination of oils and chemicals and all kinds of things. They want to make it cheaper, thinner, weaker, and that's why you see cars, Hot Wheels diecast, Matchbox diecast, manufactured in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s that are in better condition than some cars made just a decade and a half ago. It's the same concept with like white paints. There's certain oils and pigments they put in there that eventually yellow. So don't even get me started on the whole custom idea with white paint and how ridiculously difficult it is to make a car that does not yellow. So now that we know why these plastics yellow and what the culprit is, how can you possibly avoid it? Well, there's some simple ideas to it, and this is the things I do. So number one, storing your car. How do you store it and why, you should choose different ways to store it. If you have a diecast like this, you could pick up a acrylic, style plastic case that you can hang on your wall. So when you have light exposed to the car, believe it or not, light bulbs can actually affect yellowing on plastic. It protects that against it. So years and years and years, possibly decades go by, you won't have to worry about the plastic being yellowed by the light bulb. If you put anything in front of sunlight, it's going to yellow. Trust me. You probably have something in your backyard that was plastic and it looks faded. That's why. Anything that's in direct contact with sunlight, no matter pretty much what you do to it, it slowly eats away at it, unless it's like an automotive grade clear coat. Good luck with that. If you're storing them indoors, I would recommend putting them in a wall mounted case. You could protect it very, very well with that. They are a little bit pricey. You can get about like a 108 count one for maybe like 130, 140. I have cases in my room that I've had for almost a decade, and they're flawless, just about. I mean, like literally, I would put them at a 9.8 out of 10. Could not recommend them more. So if you're a diecast collector that collects things and you keep your cars loose, highly recommend it. So that's one strategy there. A case to protect your loose cars, not storing them, without any protective case. Now, another thing that I would also recommend, and this is something I use a lot for customs, but you can use for anything, is these plastic 164 clamshells. Now, these are not going to super protect your car, but it can also resist some of the light effects that might happen due to light bulbs, because there's like a gajillion different types of light bulbs. Don't even get me started on the metrics and stuff for it. But things like UV light, LED lights, just straight up light bulbs, X, Y, and Z, they all affect things differently. If you ever had like a ceiling fan that was colored and the light bulb is right next to it, well, years and years and years of using it, it eventually absorbs and starts reducing the color around it, thus fading it. The same thing's going to happen to your diecast with direct exposure. Years and years and years of effect. So putting your car in any type of case is better. Like, the original box that the diecast came in. That's a good protection for a lot of it. However, it's not foolproof. So I would recommend absolutely no sunlight whatsoever, some sort of plastic case to put your car in, and then you have the third option that I would also recommend. And well, a lot of you collectors that like to keep your stuff preserved are not going to like this, but I'm just going to tell you straight up, some of this stuff you cannot avoid. Some of this plastic is so ridden with this crap, it yellows like a freight train. So like this thing was probably a batch that had a buttload or some chemical that just yellows like crazy. A lot of the 2008 Kyle Petty's, unfortunately, as how rare and sought after that diecast is, they are ridden with plastic yellowing. This is a 2000. This piece right here is a 2006 and a 2007 Chevrolet Monte Carlo cockpit interior piece. Now, you might be thinking, this thing looks really different. Yeah, because I painted it. I painted this thing gray because this thing was yellow till the cows come home. Now, unfortunately, I didn't really leave any pieces on there to kind of show you how yellowed it was, but I painted it. It's not a perfect match to the original plastic, but there's like 6 million different types of gray paints out there. Experiment. Try different ones and see what you like. So if your car, if you have a diecast you love so much, why not carefully take it apart, assuming you're adult, because, you don't want to take a rare car and screw it up if you're a kid. Use adult permission, supervision if you're a kid. But if you have a car like this that is yellowed, take the chassis out. You could spray paint it. Again, the original collectors won't like that. It'll hurt the value a little bit. But it allows you to restore plastic. I mean, wouldn't you rather have a diecast that had a gray interior like it's supposed to be, and not something that looks like it came out of a urinal in a Buffalo Wild Wings or something? Just keeping it real. So that's a kind of a bonus option, if you will. And I'll show another piece that I painted. This is the dashboard for it. But you can see how nice and shiny it is. It looks really good. And from my experience, this stuff takes a long time to yellow as well. And then if it ever did, you could just repaint it. So my point is, plastics are all manufactured different. Each individual batch of plastic is going to be different. So a diecast produced in 07 could have a completely different plastic mixture in 2008, 2009, X, Y, and Z. It does different between the manufacturers because these are different molds. Depending on the manufacturer, they have like serial codes and stuff. So my point is, some of this stuff you're not going to be able to avoid, but there is practical ways to reduce it. And my last little tidbit I'm going to talk about here is temperature. Believe it or not, temperature can affect plastic in a crazy amount of ways. So if you store your cars maybe in an attic, there's going to be a lot higher Fahrenheit in an attic than there is in, your living room or your bedroom. So if you have diecast you really care about, don't store them in a hot place, a storage shed, a storage room. Keep them in a climate controlled room, and I mean climate like 65 to 75 degrees. That's what I would do. That's what I do with my own collection. Room temperature. Preserve your cars like that. If you care about them, that's a big thing. And I'll even go a step further. 124s. Let me tell you, 124s will do this as well. I did a diecast review on two 124 Gen 4 diecasts. And one of them had half of the chassis, like half of this was like normal, like this, and then the other half was completely yellowed. So that adds another layer, is that if you have direct sunlight or like a UV light or anything like that, that's, a light bulb that's bad for yellowing, it can yellow a portion of the plastic, not the entire portion of the plastic. So that makes it even look worse because half of the plastic looks good, the other half looks like urine. So that's always great. Anyways, storing your stuff room temperature is super important because if you put something really cold, it can actually make it brittle. If you put it in obviously extreme heat, it can expedite the yellowing. And this also goes to the diecast metal itself. A lot of the Racing Champions diecast from the 2000s and the 90s was made with a more brittle style metal. And over time, the metal becomes weaker when it's exposed to extreme heat and extreme cold. Well, after a decade or two of that, it eventually makes pieces brittle. Now, fortunately, these Winter Circle diecasts that were made by Action are actually pretty good grade of diecast metal. I would actually put it closer to Hot Wheels and Matchbox in terms of quality. But with the Racing Champions ones, you have to be very careful with because the spoilers will break. I mean, I've had one car that literally was a hood open diecast and the whole front fender snapped off. I mean, you could probably take the car and just crunch it in your hand. It's insane. My point is, temperature does matter with preserving your diecast. Here is another example of plastics yellowing and, well, how you could possibly avoid it. So notice the car on the left. Clear plastic, looks great, very, very well preserved card back. These things were put in retail stores, so all it takes is one kid to pick this thing up, bend the corner, and it's permanently going to be like that. But you see how perfect and clear that diecast looks? Looks great, right? Let's set that to the side. Now look at this one. These are manufactured probably in the same batch, probably came on the same pallet or cargo container from China in the late 1990s. Look how yellowed this thing is. Now, I could see dust on this package, so I could see this sitting in someone's garage or their room that they smoke cigarettes in, X, Y, and Z. That's another thing. If you're a diecast collector and you smoke, keep your diecast away from it because they will yellow. Any plastics in that region will yellow. I'm just shooting you straight on that, trying to help you out. But you can see how foggy and how yellowed this diecast plastic clamshell is. Now, here's the tragic part about it. We've talked about how you can restore plastic parts on the diecasts. However, it's almost impossible to restore the plastic clamshell because what happens is when you take this off, it's going to peel some of this paper backing with it. So even if you took this plastic clamshell off, soaked it in hydrogen peroxide or whatever, and you de-yellowed it, when you put it back on the card back, all that printing in the background is going to be probably dissolved or removed. So my point is, it's pretty much impossible to restore a plastic clamshell. You would actually be better off like 3D printing it or something. I mean, like that's probably the only way you could truly preserve these back in your collection. But yeah, this is the horrors of yellowing with NASCAR Diecast. And depending how this one was yellow, this was, I don't know if this was from cigarette smoke or sunlight or heat. I have no idea what the origins were, but I'm assuming it's probably just for the dust, probably a little bit of everything, to be honest with you. I don't know. Do I think the card back here, the card piece is yellowed? Probably not. The car itself looks pretty good. Like the actual plastic windows, they don't look too bad. But that's another unfortunate thing about when plastic's yellow. And again, these were made probably in the same week of each other. And one's seen better days. I mean, even the back of the card. Check this out. You can see on the back of the card a little bit of it's like a haze. Just a little bit of a yellowed haze a little bit. And especially on that proof of purchase decal on the bottom right, you can see the one on the right side here, I'm shaking, is kind of a cream color, and the one on the left is a lot closer to brand new. So not only does the plastic clamshell get affected, the artwork on your card backs do. So that's why I'm saying, if you really care about your stuff and you want to preserve your investment in these die casts or anything, you just be mindful how you store these. They're like humans. They are creatures of habit, and they will adapt to their environment. Well, these things will adapt to the environment you place them in. But fortunately, these are overproduced die casts, so we're not talking about like a Red Bull car or something. But again, you can fix plastic, errors or yellowing on an actual die cast. You could drill it out and put it back together. But this type of thing, when you peel it, it's going to peel the decal and all that stuff, and it's going to stick to the plastic. So when you soak it, it's going to probably remove it, and then you're just going to have a crazy white line around it. It's going to look horrible. So that's just another example of how important it is to preserve die casts you really, really care about in a room temperature, smoke-free area. A little room to the corner or something for your die-cast collection. That's my best advice, especially for the younger fans out there that might not know or how to properly protect your cars. Because I was like that as a kid. As a kid, you want to throw your cars around and do all that stuff.
Oh, hell no, man.
Last little tidbit. If you're someone who doesn't want to paint your parts, you don't want to, take the route of doing this, and you want to restore your stuff, this is a tip for you. I highly recommend looking up retro brighting. Retro brighting. It is it's a new-ish type of, I guess you could say science project, if you will, of how to de-yellow plastics. And this is exclusive, I say exclusive, but this is very, very good for clear plastics. Because obviously, you can't spray paint these, right? It would look stupid. So how do you get a piece of plastic like this that is yellowed to look like urine, to look something like this, brand new? Well, what I have discovered, or I say discovered, but what I've done in the past is you take a jar, you take hydrogen peroxide, you put a little bit in it, and you put it out in the sun for a little bit. You got to watch it, right? You don't want to put too much, just put enough, and you let the plastic sit in there. So what I like to do is I put a toothpick and I kind of stick it through the plastic and just let it sit there. Well, what happens is the sun reacts with the hydrogen peroxide, and it reverses that yellowing effect I talked about earlier in the video. The molecules, instead of it going to the surface and appearing yellowed like that, it goes back into the middle of the plastic, so it kind of reverses it. I have tested this myself, and to be honest with you, the results are amazing. However, this is not for everyone because you need sunlight. So if you're in a portion of the country that is colder, this is not going to work for you. You'd probably have to get a buddy or someone to do it. But obviously, if you're going to use hydrogen peroxide, anything like that, always adult supervision if you're a kid. Look it up on YouTube. People do this with like vintage Mac computers, vintage video game consoles, like on a Super Nintendo, the plastic and stuff. it gets yellowed because it's light colored, they'll take it outside and they'll retrobrite it. Now this effect does help. I have used this to restore plastic parts. The problem is it takes time. It could take a week, it could take days, and then if you have any rain, because you need to put it in a jar and it needs to have sunlight to it, you have to watch to make sure there's no water in there, because then it can dilute it. And this is another thing that I've also learned, is it's not a permanent solution. It can help it, but a year or two, maybe half a decade, you might have to go back and restore those parts. So this is kind of a crash course of what to expect and how to possibly fix and preserve yellowing for diecast. I hope you'll learn something today. Check out retrobriting. It's a fun little science project. I've done it myself. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, be careful. Wear like some glasses or something, because if it splashes in your eye, that's not going to be fun. So don't come here blaming me. But thank y'all for watching. And I hope that you'll learn something here, guys, because I'm passionate about diecast, and I've spent years learning this stuff. And if I can help a collector out there preserve their diecasts and help them keep their diecasts in good condition, absolutely. And this goes for custom diecasts too, because the paint you use for lightly colored diecasts, especially white diecasts, it can yellow extremely easily. It's be made with a yellowing resistant paint and a clear coat and all that stuff. But then even after that's done, you still have to preserve and store the diecast itself. So there's a whole different diatribe about the whole custom painting thing with yellowing. But anyways, I appreciate y'all tuning in. So hopefully y'all learned something. So in conclusion, how you preserve diecast is really going to be the most critical aspect. You can have a diecast brand new, sealed in the package, and if you store it in the incorrect climate, it can yellow, it can get brittle. Some diecasts are already brittle as there is, because that's how they're factory made. Make sure to use practical common sense when storing your stuff. Keep it away from the obvious things: windows, attics, storage sheds, things that can get really, really hot, and that will actually reduce the chances of yellowing. Obviously, smoke, stuff like that will affect it. But most of the time, plastic is going to yellow regardless. It's just a matter of when. You know, like some diecasts, as I showed with the two Dale Earnhardt ones, those were probably manufactured within a day of each other back in 1997, 1998. And one of them's yellowed and one's not. So there's hope. If you preserve your stuff, it's going to last. If you don't, you've seen the plastic parts. That's what happens. And again, there's ways to fix things. There's ways to kind of, keep it going. But it's just the nature of plastic themselves. Plastic is plastic. It is cheap. It's a cheap metal. That's really what it is. It is a cheap, off-brand, Dollar Tree version of metal. That's really what it is. It doesn't last long. It's brittle, and you have to kind of accept that and go with it. So when you see diecasts that are yellow, don't get upset about it. Preserve them, fix them up. It's easy to do, and hopefully y'all learned something in this video, guys. Thank y'all so much for watching. Have a blessed one, everybody. If you can, give the video a huge thumbs up, and maybe share with a friend or two. Maybe you have some younger diecast fans that don't know how to protect their collection, or maybe they have yellow diecast and they can't understand why one car made in 10 years ago is in a better condition than a car made 5 years ago or 15 years ago. Whatever it is, every diecast is made differently. Plastics are a formation of oils and chemicals and stuff, and depending how the chemicals they're made with, they can yellow a lot more. Like, there's some cars from the 80s that haven't even yellowed. I'm not even kidding you. So it just depends how they're manufactured, and as a collector, there's nothing much you can do about it. That is all for now, guys. Happy collecting, and hopefully your crap doesn't yellow, because that's no fun. Diecast Buffet signing off.